Hello everybody and welcome to Overgrowth. I had this game on my wishlist for years before finally getting into it, and I gotta say, it's a really great game with a few glaring flaws. This game was developed by Wolfire Games, who also made a game called Receiver, which was very forward-thinking, and I may have to review that in the future, but this is about Overgrowth, so let's take a look at this game. Before we jump in, let's have a peek at the settings menu. We've got 4 tabs here, with graphics being the first. We have our overall detail. You can decide on the monitor, the resolution, windowed mode, you've got anti-aliasing, anisotropic filtering, texture detail, object detail, and then down here you can turn some of the more intensive settings down like fog and water. At the very bottom we have our motion blur settings and our brightness. Now I'm gonna say this because I always do, but an FOV slider would be great. As far as I know, you can download mods to adjust the field of view, but it's just something this game should have. Moving on to the audio tab, we have music volume and master volume, which is just not enough. There's a lot of fighting in this game, and sometimes it can get loud, so being able to turn that down would be nice without sacrificing footsteps and things like that. In the game settings, we have our difficulty presets, casual, hardcore, and extreme, your game speed, which is kind of a cool setting to play around with, then game difficulty, which had me confused at first, but when you scroll through it, it just does the same thing as the difficulty presets, just adding in slight differences as the bar goes up and down. Not sure why they'd need to add that, but it is kind of cool. You can turn on tutorials and automatic ledge grabbing, which is necessary in this game, and then the blood amount and color, from which there are 4. The last tab lets you adjust the controls, and this menu here makes the game look very simple, and that's kinda because it is. It definitely has a learning curve, but once you grasp it, the game becomes a cakewalk, and I'll show you that in a second. So if we hit the play button, you'll notice there's a lot of content here. See, the developers worked on a game before this and Receiver called Lagaroo the Rabbit's Foot, and they've added that story into the game along with the Overgrowth story, which is very cool and definitely gives you a lot of content for your buck. You also have a tutorial, some arena modes, sandbox levels, and a versus where you can play against one of your friends in a couch co-op setting. Now that sounds cool, but I'll get to why that could be a lot better later. Another thing too about this game is it's open source and a ton of mods and levels have been made for it, which in my opinion could be the thing that keeps this game alive. So let's jump into the story here and talk about what makes this game great and what hinders it. Let's start with the combat. I love the combat in this game. You feel so powerful as you play, but the enemies are just as tough even on the normal modes. It won't take long for you to think, oh, it's only 4 guys, I can take them, only to get your teeth kicked in. You'll die a lot, and almost never does it feel unfair. And I say almost because enemies with throwable weapons do not always fall under the fair category.
Oh my god! Wow! What? Wow, that's a crazy ass dog, dude!
Everything in the game feels really satisfying, from the jumping to the combat to the platforming. Even when I die over and over to the same ledge, it doesn't annoy me because I know it's just me not grasping something. And when I finally do figure it out, it kind of feels as though I've beaten a puzzle, and I respect that from this game. Now, like I said before, there are 2 stories you can choose from when you start the game. Lagaroo's Tale and then the Overgrowth story, and this is kind of where the game leaves a lot to be desired. See, the maps are very specific and linear. They designed this world that feels really large and explorable, but you start to realize pretty fast that you're just tossed into a map to do a job and then pulled out and placed into a new one once you've completed said job, which is really disappointing. I wouldn't have minded even having a small map to roam around in, maybe picking up collectibles along the way that are hidden in hard to reach areas for people who put the time in to master the platforming. It's just one of those games that has a lot of potential, but it seems limited by its engine. And I do want to blame the engine here because the developers seem very competent and incorporate a lot of really innovative ideas. The part that really turned me off though was the writing. If you asked me the story of either Overgrowth or Lagaroo's Tale, I could only give you the gist of it, and that's mostly because the writing in this game is quite bad. And I hate to say this because I love playing the game. I've played through both stories about 3 times each, but I always skip through the dialogue because of how cringy it is. You'll have parts where the main character talks about how amazing and powerful he is, and other characters on screen appear, and it just often feels like they're only there to agree and suck him off. Oh no, we're up against wolves! We'll never survive! Stand back, I'll handle this, and I know that isn't so bad. But if I had to describe it, I'd say it was written in a similar way that Super Friends was written. It just tries too hard to be cool, and that really sucks because combined with the way it throws me from level to level, it just really takes me out of the whole experience and makes it really hard for me to show the game to my more cynical friends. When I have to preface with, oh, hey, this is a really good game, but ignore the dialogue and don't mind the level transitioning, it doesn't exactly make them anxious to play it. Now I do want to go back to the other content because though this game doesn't come with a ton in that you can probably beat both the main stories in 4 to 5 hours, this game is open up to the Steam Workshop, which I honestly think is what will keep this game alive. I haven't had a single player game keep me interested like this in a while, but the mechanics are that good. And with these mechanics in combination with speedrun maps, enemy filled levels, and alternative stories, it makes up a bit for the lack of rich engrossing campaign. Now let's get back to the versus mode. By now I've shown you enough combat to get you interested, and again, I can't tell you how much I enjoy the fighting in this game. So why on earth the developers did this, I'll never know. This is the Versus mode. Now this mode is probably one of the worst modes added to the game. They went with a sort of Street Fighter vibe here, which I thought was kind of funny. It does make the camera a bit weird, but that's forgivable. The issue here is there's no way to connect online without installing a mod. So if I want to play this with my friends, they have to plug in a controller to play. Problem with this is the person on keyboard and mouse has a strict advantage, and though you can use two controllers to play the game, it's just really annoying to have to relearn the game on a controller since there's already a pretty heavy learning curve on the keyboard and mouse. Now you can download mod maps and spawn in playable characters, and if you have the multiplayer mod, you can brawl that way. Which I gotta say is easily one of the only ways to play this game with friends, but it kinda sucks that the co-op game mode is so dissatisfying. I mean, this whole time I've been talking, my brother and I were playing. I'm the bunny in the green and he's the one in the red, and the only time he actually won was when we used swords only, and swords are random insta-kills, so it wasn't exactly skill-based. With all these problems in mind, you do have to put into question how good the combat is, if it's the sole thing that keeps me around. And if you pick this game up and don't enjoy the fighting mechanics, then I highly doubt you'll find much here to hold your attention. This moves us over to our second game, which suffers from a similar problem. Funnily enough, I played this a long time ago when it was just a demo in Game Jolt. This game is easily one of my favorite 3D roguelikes as the combat is fun, the game is very lively, and it tells a nice tale. Once you start the game, you're given 3 weapons to switch between as you run through the first map. As you go, you can collect better items and weapons, and you can level them up as you collect bolts from the other robots that you destroy. The game is really neat and surprisingly large, with 3 huge maps to complete, and the ending of the game leaves you wanting to go back and play it the right way. Now, I'm not going to comment too much on that for fear of spoiling it for those who may want to give it a go for themselves. The combat is really straightforward too. I definitely recommend using a controller to play this game though. You can use a keyboard and mouse, but it just seems like the game was designed around a controller, which is fine. Rocket League is the same way, and I have no problems with that. As you play through the game more and more though, you start to learn that the protagonist has a purpose in this grand scheme, and the story is slowly told as you progress. The sad part, however, is just like Overgrowth, the game feels like it was written by a child. See, you have these rooms throughout the game where you can meet someone named Slash. At first you think he's an enemy, a mini-boss, but if you spare his life, he befriends you and asks you to do things for him throughout the game. And this is great. It adds a whole new reason to play if only the characters didn't talk to each other like they were 13 and had a crush on each other. It's things like this that can just take a player out of it. And I'm not saying it to be mean, I definitely think the developers behind this, A Heart Full of Games, definitely knew what they were doing when it came to the gameplay. It's just kinda sad that this area was so weak in both of these games. This can be a huge thing for people when they're talking about games they like, especially if the game is story-driven, like both of these are. Overall, I do recommend these games. They're incredibly fun to play and both offer a ton of replayability. Overgrowth goes for $29.99 US, and Heart and Slash goes for $14.99 US, or your regional equivalent. If they seem up your alley, why not give them a try? And I'll see you in the next one.